Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Kalaye Sundarakaram Sadaika Priyadarshanam Ajnananashakam Devam Sadgurum Muralidharam Murali Mandita Karakamalam Munijanamohanam Vyatyastapadam Vanamala Dharinam Prema Bhakta Mandala Nitya Kirtitam Shri Premika Varadam Ashrayeham Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Pranamo Dukkha Shamanah Tam Namami Harim Param Shri Haraye Namaha Shri Haraye Namaha Shri Haraye Namaha Gopika Jeevana Smaranam Govinda Govinda Sadgurunath Maharaj Ki Jai. Nine grace of Lord Sri Hari, our very beloved Sri Madhuri Sakhi Sameta Premika Varada Thakurji, and by the immense kripa of our Sadguru Maharaj, His Holiness Maharanyam Sri Muralidhara Swamiji. We are very blessed to be back for yet another session of this Kishora Bhagavatam. And in the last session that we met, we saw the very first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, in which we saw the setting of the story, how the whole story begins in Naimisharanya, the forest which is not different from Bhagavan, and how the listeners here are the Shaunakadi Rishis, and the Vakta, the speaker, is Suta Pauranika. And Shaunakadi Rishis put 6 questions to Suta Pauranika, and we also saw the 6 short answers given by Suta Pauranika, which is going to be this entire Bhagavatam. So before Suta Pauranika gives the reply, starts the reply, just like we all do. See, when we begin a lecture or whenever we begin any activity, how do we start the activity? How do we start a lecture? We start by chanting Nama, and then we chant the dhyana slokas like we did now, Kalaye Sundara Gharam. You know, where we do the dhyana of our Guru Maharaj, and then we do the dhyana of the Ishta Devata, right? So this is the Paddhati, this is the tradition. Similarly, our Suta Pauranika also begins his lecture. You know, he starts his narration with a dhyana first, because he is going to talk about Bhagavatam. He starts with a dhyana, and these two are the dhyana shlokas, which we also chant when we chant Bhagavata dhyana shlokas, right? We chant the first 3 shlokas of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the dhyana shloka given by Sri Vyasacharya. And then Suta Pauranika gives us these 2 dhyana shlokas. He says, Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam Dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhava Putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedhu Tam sarvabhuta hridayam munimanatosmi Yasvanubhavam akhila shrutisaaramekam Adhyatma deepam atitirshatam tamondham Samsarinam karunayaha purana guhyam Tam vyasa sunam upayami gurum muninam Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhava. So Suta Pauranika starts with the dhyana shloka of his guru. And who is his guru? Sri Shukacharya. Sri Shukacharya is the guru of our Suta Pauranika. Right? See, here in this dhyana shloka, he tells us a very beautiful incident. See, dhyana can be done in different ways. Sometimes we do the dhyana of just the nama. Even that is dhyana. If you all sit together, or if you are in your own house, in your puja room, and you close your eyes and you're chanting Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. mentally, right? Or even aloud, even if you chant it aloud, if you simultaneously see that divine name within you, you don't see it outside, but when you close your eyes and if you can still see the nama running right in front of your eyes, the inner eye, then that itself is dhyana. So nama alone can be done as dhyana. So dhyana can be just chanting Bhagavan nama, or dhyana can be rupa dhyana. What is rupa dhyana? When we think of the form of Bhagavan, how Bhagavan has a flute in his hand, how he has his legs crossed, how he has a beautiful peacock feather for his crown. When we think of the rupa, the form of Bhagavan, that is another type of dhyana, right? So there is nama dhyana and there is rupa dhyana, or the dhyana of form. Similarly, there is another dhyana which can be done, which is not a fixed dhyana like just nama or the rupa, but this dhyana is like what the gopis say, viharanantate dhyana mangalam. In the beautiful Gopika Geetam, which most of you know by heart, they say viharanantate dhyana mangalam. Just thinking of some leela of Bhagwan. You imagine the entire leela of Bhagavan. If you choose the Govardhana leela like Meera Mata, then you start thinking of the entire leela, how Bhagavan woke up in the morning, found all the halchal that was happening. He goes to Nanda Baba. He's asking him what's happening, what is the function, what is the event. Starting from that point, the reply of Nanda Baba, the counter argument of Krishna, if you can imagine all this, and then you think of how Bhagavan lifts the Govardhana when Indra gets angry and is pouring cats and dogs, when he does that. So when you think of all this as a leela, that is also a dhyana. That is leela dhyana. You think of the leela, the divine leela of Bhagavan. Similarly, we can just do the dhyana of our Guru's name, or we can do the dhyana of Guru's form, or we can do the dhyana of how our Guru Maharaj spoke with us. How we all went to the ashram, and when we entered ashram, how our Guru Maharaj was sitting in his beautiful cane chair there, and he was giving darshan to devotees, and how we were all standing in the queue, and while standing in the queue, how we were relishing the darshan of Premika Varadan and our Guru Maharaj, and how we carried some offering to Guru Maharaj, some fruits to Guru Maharaj, and how he lovingly accepted them, and how our Guru Maharaj very sweetly spoke to us, inquired about our trip, from US or from Bangalore, or, from our own home, and how he inquired about our family members, etc., etc. When you think of all this, that itself is dhyana. Similarly, our Suta Pauranika also does the dhyana of his guru, Sri Shuka. How? As a leela that he did. And what was that? So this particular shloka, it recollects, in this, our Suta Pauranika recollects what happened between Sri Vedavyasa Maharishi and his son, Sri Shukacharya. Now, Vedavyasa Maharishi is Bhagavan himself. And Shukacharya was Ayonija, which means he was not born to a mother like all of us, but it is what we call as Avirbhava. Avirbhava means he just appeared, he just manifested himself from Agni, from a sacrificial fire. He just came out of that. So it was an Avirbhava, and when he came out as a 16-year-old Yuva, a young lad, 16-year-old. And the moment he was born, he did not even turn to look at who his father was, but he just ran to the forest. He just walked towards the forest without caring for anybody or anything around him from the moment he was born, right? And then Sri Vedavyasa Maharishi saw his child Shukacharya walking away like that, just away from him. He runs behind him calling, Putra, Putra, Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti. Right? So, for Vyasa Maharishi, Dvaipayana, because of the Viraha, because he could not bear the separation from his son, Sri Shukacharya, he ran behind him calling out, Putra, Putra. Right? But it seems our Shukacharya did not turn around to reply to his father. Instead, the trees, Taravo Abhineduhu, the trees which were there in that forest, they replied to Sri Vedavyasa Maharishi and they asked him, what do you want? Now, what does this mean? This means that Sri Shukacharya was so established in the oneness with this entire universe that he was not different from anything around him. He was everything, which means Shukacharya was born as a jnani. That's why he is called Garbha Shriman. There are 3 people who are called Garbha Shriman, which means they were jnanis, they were realized souls, right while they were in the womb of their mother. One is our Shukacharya, who's a Garbha Shriman. Then we have Prahalada, who's also Garbha Shriman. And then we have Parikshit, who is also Garbha Shriman. Why? Because Shukacharya was a jnani while he was still in the womb of his mother. Prahalada got the satsang of Narada Maharishi and he was given the upadesha of Bhagavan Nama while he was still in the womb of his mother. And since Bhagavan Nama is not different from Bhagavan, Prahalada was also Garbha Shriman. And Parikshit was the fortunate one who had the darshan of Bhagavan himself in the womb of his mother. So these 3 are called Garbha Shriman. And since our Shukacharya was such a great jnani, such a Jivan Mukta. See, these are terms that you should remember and learn, and someday we'll actually understand these words in the real sense. Jivan Mukta is someone who is a liberated soul while still living, right? So many of them attain liberation after they die, at the moment of death. But great jnanis, they are Jivan Muktas, they live in this world as liberated souls. So our Shukacharya was one such great realized soul. And that greatness is what is spoken of in this beautiful shloka, where our Suta Pauranika recollects this leela of his guru, which he did the moment he was born, where our Vyasa Maharishi was running behind his son. Later, in the next chapter, there is another incident which is, which is something that is a continuity of this particular incident, which says that when Shukacharya was running like that, when he was moving away from his father and Vyasacharya was chasing him, calling him out, it seems Shukacharya went across a little lake where, Devata trees, celestial women were having their bath. And when they saw Shukacharya pass through them, he was a young lad, he was avadhuta, which means he was not wearing any clothes. In spite of all that, the women who were having their bath were not perturbed at all. They were not abashed at all. They just carried on with whatever they were doing. But when they saw Vyasacharya, who was well clad as a rishi and who was very old, when they saw him pass through them, they immediately felt very shy and they dressed up themselves and out of modesty. And Vyasacharya asks them the reason for this behavior. He's asking them, why did you do this? You saw, my son was such a young lad. When you saw him cross, you did not feel ashamed at all, abashed at all. But when you saw me, suddenly you felt very aware of, the way you were. So why this difference? And that's when these women, they say, it's because when your son crossed us, we did not even feel the difference that he was a man and we were women, because he had that kind of abheda bhava. He had absolutely no bheda bhava. He absolutely has no difference. He sees everything as that Brahman, that Paramatma, that Bhagavan. So we also did not see any difference. Now, Vyasacharya himself tells this incident in Bhagavatam to show the greatness of Sri Shukacharya. Why? 2 reasons. Suta Pauranika is recollecting this to show us the greatness of Shukacharya. Why? Because one, Shukacharya is going to be the primary speaker. Remember, we discussed about the Vakta, the 3 Vaktas and the 3 Shrotas In the very beginning, the speakers and the listeners, to show that Sri Shukacharya is the Uttama Vakta. He is the greatest among all the speakers, all the narrators of Srimad Bhagavatam. Just to show that he was really great, this incident is given in the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Because in one of the most beautiful kirtans of our Guru Maharaj, which all of you know, I'm sure, Kadakelu, Kadakelu, Sada Hari Kadayeni Kelu. In that kirtan, in that Madhura Geetam, our Guru Maharaj beautifully says, Bhakti Virakti Yudan Kadai Solbavaridam Shraddha Bhakti Yudan Kadai Kelu. He tells two qualities that are important for the speaker and two qualities that are very important for the listener. What are they? Bhakti and Virakti for the speaker, and Shraddha and Bhakti for the listener. Right? Bhakti Virakti Yudan Kade Sulbavaridam, Shraddha Bhakti Yudan Kade Kele. Which means the speaker, the narrator of Bhagavatam, should be someone who practices what he preaches. He should have that kind of love for Bhagavan, and he should have that kind of dispassion, virakti, right? Only when we have something with us can we share it with others, is it not? If we offer to share something that we don't have, then it is cheating and it is of no value, is it not? See, our Guru Maharaj would give a very beautiful example. Sometimes we see children playing, even as kids, we would have played a lot of kind of pretend and play games, right? And one such pretend and play would be where two friends play and one friend pretends to be the seller of sweets, right? And he pretends to be carrying some sweets in a basket on his head and he walks around the streets. And the other friend pretends to be a buyer and he calls out to this sweet seller and he says, give me some sweets. Now it's only a pretend and play. So this boy, this friend who's a seller, does not actually have any sweets with him, nor does the buyer have any money on him. So when they pretend and play, this buyer, he pretends to give some money and the seller pretends to give some sweets. Now, did anyone gain anything out of this? Nothing at all, is it not? So when someone starts preaching about everyone should tell Nama, or if they start talking about Bhagavatam and love for Bhagwan and all the Leelas, etc., and if they do not practice any of it, it will not touch the listener. Right? So here, our Suta Pauranika tells this incident to show how Shukacharya was such a great jnani and how fortunate we are to be listening, how fortunate he was, because Suta Pauranika learnt Bhagavatam from Shukacharya. How? He heard Shukacharya tell Bhagavatam to Parikshit. Shukacharya told Bhagavatam only to Parikshit, remember that. But there were many rishis who gathered there when they knew that Shukacharya was going to tell Bhagavatam. And Suta Pauranika was just one of them. He was only one amongst the many who were gathered there as what we call as Upashrota. He was not the Mukhya Shrota. Who was the Mukhya Shrota? Parikshit was the Mukhya Shrota. But he was here as Upashrota and he learnt Bhagavatam by listening to Shukacharya narrate this Bhagavatam to Parikshit. That's how he learnt. So he tells the greatness of his Guru to show who the Vakta of this Bhagavatam is. How great he is. Also, because he was his Guru, and whenever a disciple starts telling Katha, starts telling Bhagwan's glories, Bhagavad Gunanubhava, he starts with a dhyana sloka, like I said in the beginning. Why? Because they acknowledge that of course, they meditate on their Guru, and they also acknowledge that they are merely channels, through which their Guru would speak. So he says, now I'm going to tell you Bhagavatam, but who's actually going to tell Bhagavatam through me? It is going to be my Guru, who is going to sit in my heart, and he is going to remind me of that Bhagavatam that I learned from him. He is the one who's going to inspire me from within, and he is the one who's going to speak through me. So just to show that, he tells this beautiful dhyana shloka of his guru, and with that bhava that it is his guru who is speaking through him, he tells another dhyana shloka where he talks about how great this Bhagavata Purana is, the subject. It is Swanubhavam, which means it has its own glory, and it's also the Anubhava of his Guru, Sri Shukacharya. It is also the experience of his Guru. It is Akhila Shrutisara Ekam. It is the essence of all Vedas, of all the Shastras. Akhila Shrutisara Ekam. It is Adhyatma Deepam. When our heart, when our mind is clouded by ignorance, in the darkness of ignorance, this Bhagavatam serves as a deepam, as a light to clear off the darkness of ignorance. And this deepam is the jnana deepam, tamondham. It takes us across this darkness of ignorance. And our Guru Maharaj, our Sri Shukacharya, he says, gave this Purana to the world for the samsaris out of compassion, karunaya. So, he not only remembers his Guru, not only he meditates upon his Guru, but he also shows gratitude for his Guru. Why? Because he feels grateful that his Guru gave this world this Bhagavatam. So these are some beautiful shlokas. Because we chant dhyana shlokas regularly, I thought we should know what they mean. So next time when you chant Bhagavata dhyana shlokas, and when you chant these two shlokas, you can do the dhyana of how great Shukacharya is, just like our Suta Pauranika does. And after giving this dhyana shlokas, he also thinks of Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiret. So Narayana, Naranarayana, Bhagavan, he thinks of them. He thinks of Saraswati Devi. He thinks of Vyasa Maharishi. He thinks of all the gurus, and he does a namaskara. And then he starts giving the reply to the questions of our Shaunakadi Rishis. And the very beginning he says, what is dharma? And what is the paradharma? Which means, what is the highest duty of anybody? Pumsa means anybody. Puman means anybody. Not particularly men or women, but everybody. What is their highest duty? He says, that is the highest duty, yataha, from which arises devotion to the Lord. So whatever we do, what should that dharma do for us? It should give us Bhagavad Bhakti. And that too, what kind of bhakti? He says, ahaituki apratihata. These are two very beautiful words. Ahaituki apratihata. Ahaituki means causeless. Apratihata means without any obstruction. Right? Ahaituki apratihata. How should bhakti be? How should our devotion be? It should be causeless and it should be without obstruction. Now we have to understand, only if it is causeless can it be without any obstruction. Because as long as there is a cause for our love, if it is not ahaituki, then what happens? If, say for example, someone asks you, why do you love someone? If you're able to give a reason, about why you love someone, once the reason is lost, the love is lost. Right? Because if you say, I love someone because he is beautiful, or if she is very kind, someday you find that they do not act kindly, then you may not love them anymore. So, ahaituki, how should the love for Bhagwan be in our heart? It should not be it should not, have a cause. It should be causeless. And only when it is causeless will it be apratihada. Nothing can stop. Look at Meera. Look at her life story. She faced so many hardships, but her love for Krishna never died. Look at Prahalada. He faced so many hardships, but his love for Krishna never died. Why? Because they did not equate that love with anything else. That love was pristine, pure, and it was that love for Bhagwan was for the sake of Bhagwan himself and not for the sake of anything else. And that is why nothing that happened in their life could actually obstruct the love they had for Bhagwan, right? So he says that the supreme dharma for anybody is to develop that kind of love for Bhagwan, which is causeless and which has no obstruction, right? Now, how do we get to that bhakti is what he's going to tell further, which we will see in the next session. So in today's session, remember we saw the dhyana slokas. I know we are going pretty slowly here, but I thought, we are not going to go through all the slokas in all the chapters, etc. We are going to focus only on stories, I promise you. But there are some very, very beautiful slokas, some of them where we can learn so much, and we can practice so much of them in our life. So I thought we'll choose those slokas on our way towards the story so that we get to enjoy that also. So we'll stop with this for today's session, and you can continue with the Parayana, and we'll continue with how one develops this kind of bhakti in the next session. Kayena vacha manasendriyeva buddhyatmana va prakrite svabhavat karomi yatyat sakalam parasmai Srimannarayanayeti samarpayami. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Radhe Radhe.